was Halloween night in Maple Hollow, a quiet town where nothing ever really happened until that year. The air was sharp with cold, carrying the smell of burnt pumpkin candles and fallen leaves. Porch lights blinked on one by one, each house glowing like its own tiny world of laughter and candy. But at the very end of Hawthorne Street, where the pavement cracked and the trees grew too close together, there stood a single house that never joined in. A slanted gray one-story home that everyone called the Dalloway House. It had been there longer than anyone could remember, older than the new streetlights, older than most of the neighbors. Nobody mowed its yard. The paint peeled in wide strips. The windows were so dirty that they looked black, like eyes that refused to blink. And yet that every Halloween night a single ceramic bowl appeared on its porch. No lights, no decorations, no sounds from inside. Just the bowl, centered perfectly beneath the porch light that never turned on, with a handwritten note taped above it. Take one. Inside always the same thing, and pieces of gold foil candy, round, heavy, smooth. For years, neighborhood parents warned their kids to stay away from the Dalloway House. But kids are curious. And that year, so was Sophie Jensen. She was 9, the kind of kid who asked too many questions and didn't scare easily. Her family had just moved into Maple Hollow a few weeks before Halloween, and she'd already planned her entire route with 2 new friends, Maya and Eli. They wore matching costumes, all skeletons painted white on black fabric, faces glowing with phosphorescent paint. They promised each other they'd hit every house on the block, even that one. When they reached the end of the street, the noise of the neighborhood had faded into distant laughter. The only sound was wind through dry leaves and the faint rattle of a loose shutter on the Dalloway porch. "There it is," Maya whispered. The bowl sat exactly where people said it would, in the center of the porch, perfectly still, perfectly clean, as if someone had just placed it there. The candies inside caught what little moonlight there was, gleaming like gold coins. "Should we?" Eli asked. Sophie hesitated. The house seemed to lean toward them like it was listening. "Come on," she said, finally forcing a grin. "We can't skip it. We said every house." They climbed the porch steps, the wood creaking under their feet. The sign above the bowl was written in large, uneven letters. The paper was yellowed, edges curling. Eli reached in first, grabbing a piece. "Weird candy," he muttered. "It's warm." Sophie laughed nervously. "That's impossible." But when she touched one, it was warm. Not hot, just like it had been sitting in someone's hand. Each candy was perfectly smooth, wrapped tightly in dull golden foil with no branding. Sophie slipped one into her bag. "Okay, done. Let's go before we summon a ghost or something." They ran off laughing, but none of them turned around to see the porch light flicker faintly behind them. At home, Sophie dumped her candy out on the kitchen table. Her dad, Mark Jensen, stood nearby with a flashlight and a weary smile. "All right, let's see the loot." He began sorting through the pile, checking for open wrappers like every responsible parent does. Chocolate bars, gummies, lollipops, then the gold one. He picked it up. "Where's this from?" Sophie shrugged. "The house at the end of the street." He frowned. "The one that's all dark?" "Yeah, but it had candy out," she said innocently. He rolled it between his fingers. No label, no markings, just smooth foil. "Probably imported or something," he said. "But maybe don't eat this one yet, okay?" She nodded, but she slipped it into her hoodie pocket when he wasn't looking. Later that night, after the laughter died down and the porch lights went out one by one, Sophie lay awake staring at the ceiling. The candy sat on her nightstand, catching the moonlight through her window. Something about it seemed alive. She picked it up and unwrapped it slowly. The foil peeled apart in perfect silence. Inside wasn't chocolate. It was something dark red, soft and shiny like dried fruit or flesh. She sniffed it. A faint metallic tang filled her nose. Still, curiosity won. She took the smallest bite. It tasted wrong. Bitter and sweet at the same time, like syrup mixed with blood. Her tongue went numb. She spat it out immediately, wiping her mouth with her sleeve. When she looked back, the half-bitten piece was gone. She froze. The wrapper lay flat on the table, perfectly empty. Then came the sound. A slow, dragging scrape beneath her bed. She leaned down, whispering, "Maya? Eli?" Even though she knew that made no sense. Something shifted. She saw movement in the shadows. It wasn't a mouse. It was something round, small, and glistening faintly red. Her father found her the next morning sitting on the floor, staring under the bed. Her eyes were wide and empty, like she hadn't blinked all night. "Sophie," he said softly. She didn't move. When he crouched down beside her, he saw what she was looking at. Under the bed was the gold wrapper, torn and wet, covered in something dark. He reached under and touched something hard and round. When he pulled it out, his breath caught. It looked like another piece of candy, except it was unwrapped. And on one side there was a tiny fingernail. He dropped it instantly. He tore through her candy bag, panic rising. At the bottom were 3 more golden wrappers he hadn't seen before. He threw them all in the trash, locked the lid, and stayed up that night listening. Around midnight, he heard movement outside. A soft clink of something metallic on the porch. He opened the door slowly. There, on the welcome mat, sat the bowl. The same ceramic one from Mrs. Dalloway's porch, filled to the brim with gold candies. He stepped back, heart pounding. "Who's there?" "Nothing." The street was empty, silent. He dumped the bowl into a trash bag and locked it in the garage. Then he called the police. They searched the house the next day but found nothing. No trespassers, no footprints, no fingerprints, not even the bowl. It had vanished overnight. A few days later, curiosity got the better of him. He drove to the end of the street. The Dalloway house stood as lifeless as ever, but the front door was slightly open. He pushed it gently, and it creaked inward. Inside was dark. Dust floated in the stale air. The smell hit him first, sweet and rotten at the same time. He stepped forward, shoes crunching on something underfoot. When he looked down, he saw them. Hundreds of gold wrappers covering the floor like fallen leaves. Some were fresh. Some stuck together with something dark. In the corner of the room sat a chair, and in that chair, a shape. Mrs. Dalloway, what was left of her, sat slumped, her skin thin and gray, her hands cupped in her lap like she was offering something. And in her lap was the bowl. Full again, only this time the candies weren't wrapped. Each one small, round, wet, with tiny, pale fingernails pressed into the surface. He stumbled back, covering his mouth, and from the darkness behind the chair, something moved. A shadow peeled itself off the wall, tall, wrong, silent. He bolted out the front door and didn't stop running until the house was out of sight. That night, when he got home, the trash can he'd thrown the candies into was tipped over, the lid open, and sitting neatly on the doorstep, right where the bowl had been before, was a single piece of gold candy. Still warm, and this time, it had a small bite mark in it. Every Halloween, the same street came alive. Kids laughing, parents chatting, porch lights flickering like candles in a sea of shadows. But on Red Maple Drive, there was one house everyone skipped. Number 47. No lights, no pumpkins, no decorations. Just black curtains and a sagging front porch that seemed to breathe when the wind hit it. Every kid in the neighborhood had their own version of the story. Some said the owner was a witch. Others swore someone had died there years ago, and that was why no one ever moved in. But most kids just ran past it, clutching their candy bags tight. Except for one year, when Tyler Grant and his friends decided they weren't scared of anything. It started like every Halloween. Tyler, his best friend Ryan, and Ryan's little sister Lila went out in matching costumes, zombies with cheap face paint and fake blood. They wanted to beat last year's record, 22 houses, 3 pillowcases full of candy. They hit every house on the block until they reached the end of Red Maple Drive. That's when Lila stopped. She pointed. "What about that one?" Ryan frowned. "No one lives there." But Tyler grinned. "Yeah, but what if someone does this year? What if they've got the good stuff?" The house loomed over them, its paint peeling in long strips, the porch light a dead bulb above the door. The lawn was scattered with dry leaves and broken branches. Still, there was something new. A single plastic pumpkin bucket sat on the porch, filled to the top with candy. No sign, no note, no sound. Just candy, perfectly wrapped, untouched. Ryan shook his head. "No way, it's probably old." But Tyler was already halfway up the steps. Candy doesn't expire. The boards creaked under his feet. The air smelled faintly like metal and mildew. When he reached the bucket, he froze. The candy wasn't dusty or stale, it looked brand new, but all the wrappers were blank. Shiny silver with no logo, no name, just smooth paper crinkling softly in the wind. He picked one up. It was heavier than it looked. Behind him, Ryan whispered, "Tyler, come on, let's go." But Tyler grinned. What's the worst that could happen? He dropped the candy into his bag and turned back toward the street. That's when the porch light flickered on. Just once. Then off again. The boys froze. The light hadn't worked in years. Everyone knew that. Lila tugged her brother's sleeve. "Let's go home." So they did, running all the way back without looking back once. Later that night, while dumping their candy onto the living room floor, Tyler spotted the silver-wrapped piece again. It stood out among the bright oranges and reds. He tore it open. Inside wasn't chocolate. It was black. At first he thought it was a joke. Licorice, maybe. But when he sniffed it, it didn't smell like candy. It smelled like dirt. He licked it, just a small taste. It was bitter, ashy, cold. He spit it out and laughed. "Guess I found the worst candy ever." But that night, as he brushed his teeth, he noticed something strange. His tongue was still black, and no matter how much he rinsed, it wouldn't come off. The next day, Ryan came over looking pale. "Did you eat any of that candy?" he asked. Tyler shook his head. "Just tasted it. Why?" Ryan swallowed hard. "Lila's sick. She said she saw something last night." "Saw what?" "She said someone was standing in the window of that house." Tyler laughed nervously. "It's probably just reflection or something." But later that evening, when the sun dipped low and the shadows stretched long across Red Maple Drive, he went back. The house was darker than before, if that was even possible. And in the window, behind the cracked glass, he saw it. A figure, pale still, watching. He froze. And then the porch light flicked on again. Only this time it stayed on, and the door creaked open. He should have run, but curiosity, or something else, pulled him forward. The air grew colder the closer he got. The wind stopped completely, and the night went quiet. No laughter, no cars, no wind chimes. When he stepped onto the porch, the boards didn't creak this time. The plastic pumpkin was gone. In its place was his candy bag, the one he'd carried last night, except it was empty. Every wrapper gone. He turned around, heart pounding. "Ryan?" he called softly. Nothing. Then a sound from inside. Slow, deliberate footsteps. He took one step backward, then another. The footsteps grew louder. A shape appeared in the doorway, tall, wrapped in shadow, but human. And in its hand, it held something shiny. The same silver candy wrapper. The figure raised its other hand and waved, a slow, almost friendly motion. Then it dropped the wrapper. When it hit the ground, it wasn't candy inside. It was a finger. Small, child-sized. Tyler ran. He didn't stop until he reached the end of the street, gasping for air. When he looked back, the porch light flickered twice and went out for good. The next morning, police found his candy bag again. This time, it wasn't empty. Inside were 5 pieces of candy, silver-wrapped, identical, stacked neatly. But when they opened them, each one contained something different. A tooth, a fingernail, a piece of fabric from a small Halloween costume, a strip of skin, and a black candy, identical to the one Tyler had eaten. The police sealed the house after that. No one was ever found inside. No one ever moved in again. But every year since, the same thing happens on Halloween night. The porch light flickers, and a single plastic pumpkin bucket appears full of candy. Blank silver wrappers. If you take one night, they say you'll never taste it right away, but eventually, you'll wake up in the middle of the night with something in your mouth. Something cold, something that tastes like dirt. The text came at 9:47 p.m. Lena almost ignored it. She'd been lying on her bed in her parents' house, scrolling mindlessly through her phone, half listening to the sound of the old clock ticking in the hallway. It had been 6 months since she moved back to Everwood Hollow, and every night felt the same. Slow, empty, and too quiet for comfort. The message buzzed again. Halloween party, tonight. The old Everwood house. Costumes required. Midnight start. Come alone. She frowned, reading it twice. The number wasn't saved in her phone. There was no name, no emoji signature, just the message. Her first thought was that it was a prank. Her second thought was that it might actually be fun. Everwood Hollow didn't have much going on anymore. The old cinema had shut down, the diner closed early, and the only bar in town was more of a retirement lounge. Halloween used to be special here. As a kid, she remembered the parades, the trick-or-treating, and the Everwood house legend whispered by kids at school. The house, perched on the hill at the far edge of town, had been abandoned for decades. Its owner, a man named Silas Everwood, was said to have vanished during a Halloween party in 1938. They found the lights still burning, food untouched, and music still playing on the gramophone. But everyone inside was gone. Every local had a version of the story. No one ever agreed on what really happened. Lena set her phone down, staring at the message. Maybe some teenagers were reviving the old story for fun, or maybe it was just a harmless gathering in a creepy place. Her parents were asleep. The night outside was still, and she could feel that same pull, the curiosity that always got her into trouble. By 11 p.m., she was standing in front of her mirror, tying her hair beneath a black witch's hat. She'd chosen a simple black dress, pale makeup, and a faint red lipstick that caught the glow of her nightlight. She looked at herself like she was someone else for a night. Someone who wasn't bored or lonely or restless. She grabbed her car keys and left. The road to the Everwood house was worse than she remembered. Narrow, cracked, lined with skeletal trees that seemed to lean inward. Fog hung low across the ground, thick enough to blur the fields into endless gray. Halfway there, her radio began to cut out, faint static interrupting the music, then strange, short bursts of whispering. She turned it off. When she reached the hill, her breath caught. There were cars. A dozen, maybe more, lined along the road, their windows fogged, their interiors dark. She could faintly hear music drifting through the fog, soft, tinny, old-fashioned, not pop, not techno. Something older, something that didn't belong in 2025, a slow waltz maybe, something from another century. She parked and got out. The air was sharp with cold, and the sound of the windmill creaking in the distance echoed like a groan. The house loomed ahead, 3 stories tall, its windows flickering with candlelight. The once white wood was gray and peeling, vines crawling up the porch. But through the open front door, she saw movement, silhouettes of people dancing. Her heartbeat quickened. It looked like a party. She walked up the gravel path, her boots crunching softly. Someone inside laughed, a deep, elegant laugh that sounded rehearsed. Lena hesitated at the door, peeking in. The air was thick with the scent of melted wax and dust. Every table was covered with candles, hundreds of them, dripping wax down onto yellowed lace tablecloths. Dozens of people danced in the center of the room, their faces hidden behind masks, some elaborate, others plain. Every man wore a suit or tuxedo, every woman a gown. And the strangest thing, they were all dancing to music that came from a phonograph in the corner. A record spun slowly, the needle crackling with age. "Welcome," a voice said. Lena jumped slightly. A tall man stood beside her, dressed in a black tuxedo and a white porcelain mask. "You're just in time," he said, his tone smooth but distant. "For what?" she asked. "The final dance." He extended his hand. Lena hesitated, then smiled awkwardly. "This is a really elaborate party. Who organized it?" "We all did," he said, "every year." He took her hand before she could protest and led her toward the crowd. His fingers were freezing, colder than the night outside. They stepped onto the floor, joining the slow waltz. The other dancers moved with haunting precision, each step perfectly in rhythm. No one spoke. No one laughed. Only the scratch of the record and the faint whisper of feet on wood. After a minute, Lena began to feel lightheaded, like the room was spinning too fast. She tried to laugh it off. "You guys are really committed. What is this? Some sort of historical reenactment?" The man tilted his head slightly. Her scream echoed across the empty hill. The way he said it made her skin crawl. As they turned, she caught glimpses of faces, masks that seemed to be carved from porcelain, but some had hairline cracks that revealed pale gray skin underneath. Their movements were too smooth. Their eyes behind the masks didn't blink. She glanced toward the window, but outside it was pitch black. No moon, no fog, no light at all. "How long have you all been doing this?" she asked. "Since the first guests came," the man replied. "We didn't mean to keep them, but once you're part of the dance, you can't leave." Lena froze. "What?" He smiled faintly behind his mask. "It's the rule." The record skipped once, then again, and when it did, every dancer stopped moving. Every head turned toward her, perfectly synchronized. The candles flickered, stretching shadows high up the walls. "I think I should go," she whispered. The man released her hand slowly. "You can try." She stumbled backward. The dancers began moving again, but this time without music, their heads lolling, their limbs bending wrong. Their masks cracked open wider as if their faces were splitting. The floorboards beneath her groaned, pulsing faintly under her feet. Lena ran to the door. It slammed shut on its own. The handle burned cold under her hand. She pulled. It didn't move. Behind her, the man's voice echoed. "Midnight guests never leave before dawn." She turned and saw them closing in, all of them, circling slowly, whispering things she couldn't understand. The record began to play again, but backward now. The melody distorted into something that sounded like breathing. A woman's voice, faint and cracked, sang from the phonograph. "Round and round the guests shall stay, till the dawn burns night away." Lena screamed. She grabbed a candle, flung it toward the curtains. The flames caught immediately, racing up the wall. But instead of spreading, they turned blue and sank back into the wood, as if the house itself swallowed them. The man reached for her. His mask slipped off and revealing a face half-rotted, eyes white and sunken. "Dance with us," he rasped. She bolted toward the staircase and ran. The steps shook beneath her. Every door she opened revealed another version of the ballroom. Same people, same song, looping endlessly. Finally, she crashed into a small upstairs room. A child's room, untouched by time. A dusty mirror stood in the corner. In it, she saw herself, breathing heavily, pale, shaking. But in the reflection, the door behind her was open, and dozens of masked figures stood in the mirror, even though the room behind her was empty. One of them whispered, "You already joined us." Lena woke up lying on the wooden floor, sunlight spilling through the cracks. The house was silent, empty. No candles, no music, no people. Her car was still outside, the only one there. She stumbled toward the door, breathing hard. On the wall beside it, something had been freshly carved, hundreds of names. At the bottom, Lena Marie Carter 2025. And beneath it, "Midnight guests never leave." Her scream echoed across the empty hill. That evening, police arrived after reports of strange lights and music in the abandoned Everwood house. They found no one inside, only an old phonograph spinning silently in the middle of the floor. The record was blank, but when an officer leaned in close, he swore he heard a woman's voice whisper, "It's your turn to dance." They all laughed it off. But the next night, the lights came on again. And from the road, if you listen closely, you can still hear faint music drifting through the wind. A slow, haunting waltz that stops abruptly at dawn. It was Halloween night, and the Patterson house was finally quiet. No more knocks, no more doorbells, just the faint rustle of wind through the dry oak branches outside. Jamie and Claire Patterson had spent the evening handing out candy to dozens of kids. Their porch light had been flickering all night. Probably a bad bulb, but it added to the Halloween vibe. By 10:30 p.m., most of the houses on Cedar Grove Lane had gone dark. Parents tucked their kids in, teens disappeared to after-parties, and the quiet suburban street slipped into silence. That's when the first knock came. But not on the door, on the window. 3 soft taps. Jamie turned from the couch, frowning. The sound came from the living room window, the one that faced the front yard. He stood and looked outside. Nothing. Just their jack-o'-lantern glowing faintly on the porch, its carved grin half melted from the heat of the candle inside. He shrugged it off. "Probably branches," he muttered, sitting back down. 2 minutes later, tap, tap, tap. This time louder, sharper. Claire looked up from her phone. "Did you hear that?" He nodded. "Yeah." He grabbed the flashlight from the side table and approached the window. The blinds were half open, the glass fogged from the warmth inside. He wiped a clear spot with his sleeve and aimed the light out. That's when he saw it. A small figure, about the height of a child, standing perfectly still at the end of the porch. The flashlight's beam caught the edge of a plastic mask, shiny white with hollow black eyes. A trick-or-treater. Jamie exhaled in relief and opened the door. "Hey, sorry, kid, we're out of candy. Come back next year." The figure didn't move. He stepped onto the porch, the cold air biting against his skin. "Hey? You lost or something?" Still nothing. Then, very slowly, the child turned its head toward him, stiff, mechanical. The porch light flickered once. When it came back on, the figure was gone. He stood frozen for a moment, scanning the yard. Nothing but fog and fallen leaves. When he came back inside, Claire was pale. "Jamie," she whispered, "he's still there." He turned to the window. The mask was pressed against the glass, 2 hollow black eyes staring straight in. Jamie dropped the flashlight. "What the hell?" He rushed to the door and flung it open. But the porch was empty again. The only thing left behind was a small orange candy bag sitting on the welcome mat. He picked it up. It was empty but warm to the touch. He called out into the darkness, "Who's out there?" No answer. But as he stood there, he could feel it, like something was watching from the tree line beyond the yard. He closed the door, locked it, and turned off the lights. At 11:17 p.m., the knock started again. Every window in the house. Tap, tap, tap. Kitchen, hallway, bedroom. It moved around the house, circling slowly. Claire was shaking. "Jamie, call the police." He dialed, but the line crackled with static. The lights flickered. The house grew cold. And from outside, through the window nearest the front door, a soft child's voice whispered, "Trick or treat." Jamie froze. "Did you hear that?" Claire nodded, tears in her eyes. They stayed completely still. Then the doorknob started to turn. Back and forth, slowly, gently. Jamie shouted, "Go away, I'm calling the police!" Silence. Then, from upstairs, another sound. A window sliding open. Jamie ran up the stairs 2 at a time, his heart pounding. He reached their bedroom, window still shut. But from the guest room, the air was colder. He flicked on the light. The curtains were fluttering. The window was open just a few inches. And beneath it, muddy footprints. Small. Bare. He followed the trail out into the hallway. It led down the stairs. Claire was standing frozen at the base, staring toward the living room. "Jamie," she whispered. He looked. The candy bag was back, sitting on the coffee table. Full now. The same gold foil candies he'd seen earlier that night. He reached for one, unwrapped it. Inside wasn't chocolate, it was wet, sticky, red. Something small and human-shaped pressed against the foil. A fingertip. He dropped it instantly. The front window fogged over suddenly, as if someone had breathed against it from outside. Slowly, letters began to form in the mist. "Let me in!" Jamie grabbed Claire's arm and ran for the back door. It wouldn't open. He slammed it again and again. "Come on!" The whisper came again, closer this time, right behind them. "Trick or treat." They turned. The child in the mask stood at the end of the hallway, silent, unmoving. The mask's hollow eyes caught the faint light from the living room. In one hand it held a candy bag, in the other, something that dripped. The figure took a single step forward. Jamie shouted, "What do you want?" The voice that answered wasn't a child's anymore. "You took mine." It raised its hand. The candy bag dropped to the floor, spilling out dozens of tiny, glistening pieces. Not candy. Teeth. The lights went out. When they came back, the hallway was empty. The police arrived 20 minutes later after a neighbor reported hearing screams. They found the house locked from the inside. The Pattersons were gone, but on the coffee table sat 2 small trick-or-treat bags, perfectly folded, each one filled to the brim with gold foil candies, still warm. And through the window, faintly visible in the reflection of the glass, was a small mask, white, blank, and smiling. Halloween night was supposed to be perfect. The Green family, Ethan, his wife Mara, and their 2 kids, Oliver and Lucy, had moved into the new neighborhood only 2 weeks earlier. The houses were neat, the lawns trimmed, and everyone had been friendly enough. Ethan wanted to make this Halloween special. He'd taken time off work, decorated the front yard with fake cobwebs, pumpkins, and a motion sensor witch that shrieked every time someone walked past. The kids had begged to go trick-or-treating just a bit farther this year. "Down the next block," Lucy said. There was supposed to be a cul-de-sac behind the park where the houses gave the best candy. Mara hesitated. "We haven't been that way before. Let's stay on our side tonight." But Ethan, ever the optimist, laughed. "It's a neighborhood, not a haunted forest." So at 8:30 p.m. they went. 2 kids in costumes, Lucy dressed as a fairy, Oliver as a vampire, skipping ahead with glowing candy buckets, their parents walking behind under a sky bruised purple with cloud. They crossed the park trail and emerged onto a street Ethan swore he'd never seen before. The sign at the corner read Harrow's Lane. The street looked perfect. Every house was decorated, every porch light was on. Jack-o'-lanterns lined the sidewalks, their candles burning steady despite the wind. The air even smelled sweet, like cinnamon and sugar. "See," Ethan said, "this is amazing." The kids ran from door to door laughing. At each house they came back with full handfuls of candy, the good kind, not cheap chocolate. Mara smiled faintly. Strange that nobody mentioned this street before. Ethan shrugged, probably part of the new extension. But something about it felt off. The houses were too uniform, too still. Not a curtain moved, not a single sound from inside. Not music, not laughter, nothing. And though the porches glowed with warm orange light, not one person opened a door. The kids would knock or ring the bell, and seconds later the door would just swing open on its own. Each time, a perfectly wrapped candy would be waiting in a neat little bowl by the threshold. Mara's smile faded. "Ethan, are you seeing this?" He frowned. It's probably some kind of automatic thing. Maybe they left candy out early. But she was already shaking her head. All of them? Every house? The kids didn't notice they were having the time of their lives. Until Lucy came back from one house, holding something different. A single gold foil candy. "Look," she said, "they have fancy ones." Mara felt her stomach tighten. "Where did you get that?" "From that house," Lucy pointed. "The one with the blue pumpkins." Ethan followed her finger. At the far end of the street stood a tall, narrow house with dark blue pumpkins glowing faintly on each step. The porch light flickered like a heartbeat. "Okay," he said quickly. "I think we've gone far enough." But Lucy had already run back toward the house. "Lucy!" Mara shouted. The girl stopped halfway up the path, her small silhouette framed by the orange fog. The door opened before she even knocked. A long, slow creak, like an invitation. Ethan ran forward, but by the time he reached the porch, Lucy was gone. "Lucy?" His voice echoed inside the empty doorway. No answer. He stepped inside, flashlight in hand. The house was dark, silent except for the faint sound of wind moving through the hallways. The wallpaper was peeling. The air was heavy with dust and the faint scent of rot. "Lucy?" He turned a corner and froze. In the middle of the living room was a bowl of gold foil candies, identical to the one Lucy had shown them. And sitting on top of the pile was her fairy wand. He shouted for Mara. She ran in with Oliver, trembling. "She's not here," Ethan said. His voice cracked. "She was right here." Oliver tugged at his sleeve. "Dad!" Ethan looked down. The boy was pointing toward the front door. Outside, through the dusty window, they could see the street, except it wasn't the same. The houses were gone. In their place were rows of empty lots and dead trees. The streetlights flickered in long stretches of darkness, and the sign at the corner no longer said Harrow's Lane. It said Dead End. They ran outside, screaming Lucy's name, but the road just kept going, longer than before, stretching into a fog that swallowed everything beyond a few houses. Ethan turned back toward the blue pumpkin porch. The door was closed now. And on the steps, the candy bowl had been replaced with something else, a small plastic pumpkin bucket. Inside it were two things, Lucy's wand and a child's tooth. They called the police. Officers searched for hours but found nothing. No trace of the girl, no records of a Harrow's Lane anywhere near the neighborhood. When Ethan drove back the next morning, the park trail ended in a wall of trees. There was no turn, no street, no sign. Just forest. He walked in circles until he came across something glinting in the dirt. A gold wrapper, torn, and printed faintly on the inside, words too small to have been seen before. You came back trick or treat. For weeks after, Ethan and Mara barely slept. Then one night the doorbell rang. When Ethan opened it, no one was there. But on the porch sat a small bucket full of gold candies. He stared at it, trembling. "Don't touch it," Mara whispered. But one of them began to move. Slowly the foil rippled, and a faint giggle came from inside the bucket. Then a tiny voice. "Daddy, I saved you one." The police later found the house empty. No sign of Ethan, Mara, or Oliver. But on the doorstep, there were 3 small trick-or-treat buckets. One pink, one red, one blue. Each filled to the brim with golden candies, still warm. And the wrappers, each one printed with a different name. Lucy. Mara. Ethan. You've just crossed the boundary between reality and the unknown. If you felt the fear tonight, make sure to subscribe before you leave, because on this channel every story is just the beginning. New nightmares arrive every few nights, each one darker than the last. Until then, keep your lights low, your doors locked, and your mind open. You are now part of the FearBound family.